address, be accommodated in the post-2015 framework for meaningful accountability. What about the accountability of the private sector in all of this as well? Why are the IFIs dealt with as if on a different track? Should they not be also held to the same international human rights standards as we go forward? How to link to those accountability mechanisms in the human rights system, like the treaty bodies that already exist? How to expand space for civil society and the participation of domestic and global civil society in our accountability mechanisms. I will not give those to you in any particular order, but let me just start in reverse order on the panel now to address any questions you'd like to address, maybe starting with Ivan Šimonović.
Thank you. A lot on accountability. I like it. There were a couple of questions: how to achieve accountability, how to do it practically, does it violate sovereignty? Now, ensuring accountability will not be easy, because new goals that we set up in post-2015 might not be as quantifiable, which makes accountability even more important. Now, we are dealing with different aspects of the problem of accountability. One of them is certainly methodological. So it's the issue of benchmarks, of indicators. But Roberto and you, Craig, mentioned the other aspect. It's not enough to have benchmarks. It's not enough to have indicators. We must have some organizational structure in order to ensure accountability mechanisms. I don't think that we should be inventing new mechanisms. We have a lot of mechanisms. We have to bring them together and to make them work. So on a national level, you have independent National Human Rights Commission, you have parliaments, you have Ministry of Justice, and you have a lot of international mechanisms. And there is, of course, a potential in using treaty bodies. And as you mentioned, we have now some protocols which will be enabling individuals to check whether their governments are respecting their obligations. However, we do not have that many signatories of protocol yet, and we have to use our other arsenal. We have to use other treaty bodies monitoring. We have to use our special procedures, various special mandate holders, special rapporteurs. But periodic review is definitely essential. Periodic review can ensure that each and every country's legal obligations are being tested. And what I liked very much is that you raised, and just sitting next to you, I cannot emphasize more that we need to find a place for civil society. What we need to ensure is transparency of governments, so they should reveal adequate data to be able to check. And we need an active civil society role. And it's important that you raised also the accountability of non-state actors. And you raised the issue of terminology. And of course, we can say that, for example, enterprises, private sector, they have an obligation to respect rights. But state has obligation to protect citizens and to act if a private sector is not respecting its obligations. And I think that UN guiding principles on business and human rights should be used in order also to ensure accountability of the private sector. So to conclude, we need a comprehensive mechanism, not creating something new and expensive, but bringing what we have, but putting it clear how it's going to be used to ensure accountability in post-2015 period. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Ivan. Roberto.
Yes, well, I couldn't agree more. I would just say Albert Camus once said, everything I know about politics I learned from football. And you cannot organize a football match in high school unless you have agreement on the rules and a clear role of who is the arbiter and who is the scorekeeper. And if you tell the kids that one of the players of one team will be the arbiter, they will not accept it. Now, in the international system, the scorekeeper is, and frequently the arbiter are the same institutions that are also an actor in development and that are devising the indicators and claiming victories and so on based on their own standards when they were playing. Now, that doesn't sound right. And an independent human rights mechanism should make those assessments with independent criteria. On population and development, very briefly, a couple of weeks ago in Montevideo, my city, the Montevideo Consensus was approved on a regional level, 38 states from Latin America and the Caribbean, in consensus with applause of civil society for a women's rights and human rights-based framework. And that is what we would like to see out of this process. So it hopefully could be a model expanding to other areas of development. On IFIs, they have enormous governance problems themselves, including their leadership is not elected by marriage, but on what country they come from. The promised change in the quota system has never taken place, and so on. So there are several problems in them. But they are coming out quite strongly, the IMF, much more than the World Bank, saying we have come to the point where inequalities are bad for the economy. Though they're not doing it from a human rights or a moral point of view, but they are saying the increase in poverty around the world, including in rich countries, has come to the point where the whole economy recovery cannot happen because of that. Inequalities are part of that equation. So the point is that what is economically good and morally an imperative and legally according to human rights what we need to do are all in coincidence. So let's do it.
Sarah.
Thank you. Very good questions. And we are very much a like-minded panel, so I don't have to repeat everything that has been said. But let me just take three issues and start from the last set of questions where groups of people were singled out. Indigenous, youth and children, disabilities. I think when we create a new framework, every individual should be able to recognize in that framework and in the way that it's tracked that their personal progress can be seen. That being said, what we see in the arena of inequalities is that one type of inequality overlays the other, and discrimination gets worse when you have multiple forms of inequalities. And so for policymakers, they actually have to put in place policies that are not necessarily unpackaged group by group, but address the collection of issues that affect individuals. And I think that's important to remember, because there is a distinction between a framework that is understandable, can be tracked, and the kind of policy measures that have to be taken in order to address the fundamental structural issues. That is why, my second point is, that is why when UN Women developed a sort of proposal for the dimensions that should be reflected in a new framework as far as gender equality, women's rights and women's empowerment is concerned, we really looked for those areas which analysis, empirical evidence, scholarship shows have been the roots for the greatest progress. So to link that to the question on civil society, one of the indicators that we consider very important is the ability to organize women, for women's organizations to actually play a role in society, because we've seen that where they exist, there is transformation, that it's not only policy measures that work. But going back to the question on indicators, we have essentially drawn from a set of 52 indicators that the UN Statistical Commission has agreed on at the beginning of 2013 at their meeting on gender indicators. And each one of those indicators is sort of mapped against an element of the Beijing Platform for Action, against CEDAW. So going back, the principle is really the human rights framework, and also the MDGs to the extent possible, but the MDGs were a minimalist set. So therefore, this set is not a UN Women set. It's owned by the UN system. It's also linked to ICPD and all other frameworks. And my last point is just on accountability. I think the measure, it's not just creating new, as was said already, we need to use the mechanisms that exist, but we need to see whether people are able to use those mechanisms. And therefore the point of the optional protocol to CEDAW, to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, has been in existence for a while. Why are women not using it? So that's what we need to address. Thank you.